Good afternoon and welcome to the Indie Author Show. I'm your host, Sue Miller, and I'm here today with Jennifer Jones. And for ease, Jennifer, I'm going to call you Jenny. Is that okay?
That's fine, yes.
Well, welcome. Jenny has two books. One just launched yesterday, and so we'll be talking all about her books and kind of the uniqueness of them and Jenny's background. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope everybody's had a good couple of weeks. Our last show we had Yeston Jones on talking about his book about dinosaurs, and now this week we're going to be talking about buzzards and moles and worms. So it's been quite an interesting couple of weeks with my authors, but it just goes to show you can write about anything. So Jenny, welcome to Callan FM and the Indie Author Show. Is it your first time on radio or?
Second time. I've been on Radio Merseyside.
Oh, you
yes.
were on, yes, Radio Merseyside. So yes, you're becoming a radio groupie, moving around the Northwest, getting on all the shows you can. But let's just talk a little bit about your writing journey. Now, your background is a soil scientist, and you were a lecturer at John Moores.
That's right,
yeah?
Yes.
So just tell us kind of a little bit about that, and then when you retired, and then you took a writing course, and so let's just talk a little bit about how you started writing.
Well, I think actually I've written all my life in some way or other. But obviously when you're a lecturer, then you're preparing lecture notes, you're writing scientific reports, you're writing papers. And I enjoyed doing that, and I was good at it, but I always felt there was something missing. But I didn't realise quite what it was that was missing. And I've kept diaries on and off, and that still didn't feel quite right. And then I retired and just heard about a course in creative writing run by a lady, Jude Lennon, who I'm sure your listeners know. And one day she said to me on the course, she said, you've got talent, Jenny. And nobody had ever said that to me about my creative writing. And that really gave me a boost. And that really was the start of it. And I got involved with Team Author. And I'm fascinated by natural history. And so I think it was probably logical that I would then start writing about the natural world.
Right. So that was, would you say, was that 2016?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
2016, okay. And so you do a lot of bird watching and things like that. So your first book was about birds.
Yes.
Yes, with the main star Barney, who's a buzzard.
Indeed.
Yeah. Now, and Alan Jones, who's one of Team Author's illustrators, he's brilliant with animals in the natural world, actually. His illustrations are so lifelike. I mean, you would think they were photographs, some of them, weren't they? So he illustrated your first book. And it's called Rock on Barney. So just tell us a little bit about that and kind of your bird watching history and so on. And why did you choose that one as your first story, really?
Well, the idea for Rock on Barney actually came when I was returning from a meeting in Wrexham. And it was a horrible day. We were driving back on the Wrexham bypass and I saw a buzzard on a lamppost. Mm-hmm. And I thought, gosh, he looks bedraggled and wet and lonely. And it was no more than that. Just a thought that popped into my head and as I thought, popped out again. But it didn't pop out again. It obviously hung around. And one day I was sitting thinking about what to write and suddenly the buzzard popped into my mind.
Right.
And he became Barney the buzzard in my mind. And he was a lonely buzzard. And that tapped into my thought about children who themselves may feel friendless or lonely. And gradually the story evolved that here actually was a buzzard with talent, because he's actually a rock singer. Mm-hmm. And really the theme behind it all is that people aren't always what we see. Right. And that if we get to know people better, then we can be friends with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a fun story as well because it's called Rock on Barney, and he is kind of makes me think of I don't know why, because it makes me think of Elvis Presley in a way, but the birds that are in it as well, you've made them quite true to life, so that the children who are reading the book, so is just help me remember. There's a wren and what other birds are in there?
Blue tit, bullfinch, waxwing.
And so they look like they actually are.
Yeah, and that was deliberate.
Yeah.
And I think it was a bit of a challenge for Alan Jones, because I said that I wanted the illustrations to be as realistic as possible. It wasn't just to be a story about a buzzard. I wanted it to be an introduction to some of the key birds that children might see around them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he did a brilliant job of that.
He
I think
really
they're very
did.
Lifelike.
Yeah, as I said, he's got a real talent for making his illustrations look almost like photographs. So it was a good choice to have Alan do that book. So then, so that was published. Can you help me? Tell me when?
Yes, last December.
December. Okay,
That's 2017.
Gosh, that was a while ago then, wasn't it? And so, yeah, that was ready in time for Christmas, and we've had, you've gone into schools and read in schools, have you?
Yes,
and
lots of school visits, which I love doing,
Yeah.
really enjoyed. And the children seem to enjoy the stories as
Yeah.
well.
And in keeping with the team author, I think Jude Lennon is the one who's got us all into this mascot thing. But in keeping with the tradition of having a mascot for your children's story, you did get a buzzard, which was, well, first of all, you tried everywhere, didn't you? You went to the National Trust, and you went to...
I did everything. I went around shops, I went around organisations. Nobody does a buzzard, which is sad for buzzards, really.
Yeah. No wonder this buzzard was lonely.
Yeah.
He has no friends on the shelves even. So you then turned to somebody to make a buzzard.
I did, indeed. I spoke to some of the team authors, and one of the girls, Claire Capper, she had an armadillo made, and she said, try Emily. And I tried Emily, and Emily came up with the goods, which was great.
Yeah, and it's about, what would you say, 10 or 11 inches tall? Yeah,
maybe a little bit taller, yeah.
And you take Barney into schools, because what we found with the children's authors, that you've got the story, but if you've got actually a character or one or two characters from the book, it just even makes it more alive for the child. And then they want to talk to Barney and hold him and all that kind of stuff, right? And it kind of, I know Jude's always said it allows her, from her social media standpoint, that it's, Jude has lambs, so Lammy or Flossie she can get them to do the talking, or it can be them in the photo, so it's not always her, and it allows her to be, if she wants to be in the background a little bit. Yeah. So
yeah, I find he's actually a great icebreaker in classes, really, because I take Barney and I have some smaller birds for which there were mascots available, and I take them in, and I find as I'm setting up, the children are watching, and I keep Barney hidden.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I say, and today is about Barney. Yeah. And it makes you realise how much they attach themselves to Barney, because when I'm packing up, they'll often say, goodbye, Barney.
Yeah, yeah.
So he becomes very real to them, which I think is also important.
And if you think about it, children, when they watch TV shows and so on, it's the character on the TV show, whether it's Peppa Pig or Bob the Builder or, one of I was trying to think of what's the show with the four? Now I've lost it. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. It's the four characters that don't even speak. They just make noises. You know who
Teeny
I mean.
Winky, Tinky Winky.
Tinky Winky and all them. But do you know what I mean is that they will get attached to one of those characters, and then they want that character, in their home as well. So they can. So it makes sense that you've got Barney to go around, and then, like you said, you've got the other birds that were a little easier to find. But yeah, don't challenge in one of our children's authors, because if we cannot find what we need, we will have it made.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So okay, well, we'll come back and I'll just get you maybe to just read a little bit out of Barney after my next track. And then we're going to move on and talk about Marcus. And now, who is Marcus? And Marcus is a very interesting... You do come up with interesting characters. I have to say that about you, Jenny. So, and I'm also going to be taking some photographs, and I'll put this on our Facebook page because people need to see what Marcus and Barney look like. But anyways, we'll go to this track, and then we'll come back and we'll just talk a little bit more about Barney and get Jenny to read from the story. So we're going to be talking about Marcus in a bit, but first we're going to stick with Barney the Buzzard. And I've asked Jenny if she would just read a tiny little bit. Now these books, well, this book particularly is for toddlers. It's a full picture book, full bleed, loads and loads of pictures, which Alan expertly drew. So it's ideal for, what would you say, Jenny? Kind of...
I'd say 4 to 6, actually.
4 to 6,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, younger children love looking at the pictures.
Yes.
So to have it read to them and they can look at the pictures, the feedback I've had is that they love that.
But also in schools, they do a lot with the natural world, and I've found more and more that in the younger years, they're wanting them to get outside, and they deal with soil, they deal with gardening and all that kind of thing. So they'll start recognizing these birds. So that's another brilliant thing that you've done, is make the birds very realistic.
Yes, because when I go into school, I ask the children if they know some of the birds, and some of them do, but a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
And so then I actually talk through which birds are which.
Yeah.
So it's a gentle introduction for them.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so tell us, what part are you going to read?
Okay, well, I'm going to read the part when Barney has actually just sung a song at the disco. Now, remember we said Barney was lonely, he didn't have any friends, and one day he went to the disco, and it was a Friday night, and Friday night is have-a-go night, when anybody can get up and sing. And nobody thought that a buzzard could be a good rock singer, but they said, yeah, okay, let's let him have a go. And he gets up and he sings amazingly. So I'm going to carry on from where he's just stopped singing. Everyone stopped. They were amazed. They had never heard such wonderful singing. Barney really could rock. The lapwings squealed, "Pee-wit, pee-wit, pee-wit," which was their way of saying, wow. The starlings whistled excitedly, "Tia, tia, tia, tia." Barney finished his song and bowed to the audience. The wing clapping and foot stamping that followed could be heard across the village. A bird at the back shouted, "More, more." And so it goes on from then on, in that he then appears at the disco every Friday.
Every Friday. Oh, that's cool. I love this book. It's really, really good, and I've bought it for some of my family in Canada as well. So, in some of these birds, they don't quite like the blue tit. They don't have that in Canada. So it's just, it's interesting just to add that to your education. Now, let's just go back to you being a soil scientist a bit. Tell us what that entailed, and what does that mean?
Soil science is, as it suggests, it's the science of the soil. It's exploring the soil. It's finding out how it works. And why should we care about that? Well, we should care because soil is really important to all of us in all our lives. It provides us with food. It's a home for animals. It helps us to filter water. It's important for climate change. We hear a lot about carbon in the environment with climate change. Well, soil is a major store of carbon, and we're realising now how important that's going to be with our future climate change scenarios. So every day soil has some impact on us, and I suggest to your listeners, go through a day and think about what you've eaten, what you're wearing, and I bet you can get back to soil in some way or other. So as a soil scientist, we analyse soil, we look for the chemistry of the soil, we look for the makeup of it, we try to see, is it stable, can it support a road, can it support a bridge? There's huge dimensions to it, and only last week I was helping to chair a conference in Lancaster where we had 100 soil scientists all together talking soil all day, every day, and that was fabulous, absolutely fabulous.
What drew you to that as a career? When I have a teenager in second year uni, and then I have another one in A levels, and I've never, so I have lots of friends, and I've never heard any of them say, well, I want to go to uni and be a soil scientist. So where did that come from?
Well, actually, I didn't say I want to go to uni to be a soil scientist. And they say that you never forget a good teacher. And it was 2 or 3 really brilliant teachers in uni who got me switched on to soil. And
So what did you start out with in uni?
I was
then?
doing a degree in geography and botany.
Okay.
So there was always the interest in the natural world,
Right.
And something about space and time, and something about organisms. So that was always there.
Right.
And then in the beginning of my second year, I did a soil science module. A guy called Peter James got me really switched on to soil. And then over on the botany side, two lecturers, Phil Putwain and Mike Johnson, got me switched on to the plant and human interaction side. And so I got more and more fascinated by pollution, for example.
Right.
And so I did soil science then in my second and third year undergrad years. And then I was very fortunate. I got a university scholarship to allow me to go on and do a PhD. And that was about soil as well.
Okay.
So I felt once I was hooked, that was it. There was no turning back.
So Dr. Jennifer Jones, we should be
Jennifer Jones.
Well, my husband's family, well, actually mine as well, if we go back, are agriculturalists, in Canada. And soil is so important to agriculture. And I mean, farmers, if I think back to my husband and I are from similar areas, but one part of it is very fertile, black soil, and the part where my family was very rocky. So it often will depend on what you can farm. So if the soil isn't right for crops, then you might have dairy or beef cattle or something like that, because it's good for pasture, but it's not good for growing. So there is when you think about it, soil comes into a lot of our everyday life, and we probably don't even realize that. Like even we've just moved. Well, I say just, but it's been just over a year now that we moved to a new home, and we were putting on a little extension, which dug up part of our garden. So then we had to replant a lot of the flower beds and so on. And then we found it was so clay.
Ah, yes.
It was so much clay.
Yep.
So we had to bring in loads of soil because it was, the plants
That's
just
right.
wouldn't grow properly until we brought in some more black soil. So, soil is something that we all deal with. It just, you just don't think about it, right?
No.
It's kind of like breathing or water. It's
You
there.
take it for granted.
You take it for granted, yeah. So,
And that's what we find with soil, is that whenever I say to anybody, I'm a soil scientist, they always look puzzled. Most times they've never heard of soil science. And particularly they can't imagine that females can work in soil science. So that's always quite good to say, yes, I'm a female soil scientist.
Yeah.
But everything we do, and not just in the UK, think around the world. I mean, you've mentioned Canada, and those are really great examples. But think also to less developed areas. Then with respect to agriculture, which might be their main source of income, then they get to know their soil really well. They know how they can manage it. They know what can grow in it or what they can have perhaps grazing on it. So it's absolutely critical.
It is. And you think of, I think of Asian countries, where they have, what do they call them? Where they step down.
Terraces.
Terraces, yeah. Because otherwise the rains that we'll get will come and wash the soil away, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they've adjusted to that.
Yeah.
So they know how to treat their soil with kindness and with love.
Yes,
really.
absolutely.
I know that sounds silly, but yeah. So I think you should be doing a book about the importance of soil, even just bringing it in from agriculture and growing a garden and stuff like that. I think that would be really good for children.
Well, you're the second person to say that, because the author Jill Lewis, who does a lot of, she writes wildlife conservation books, and she said to me recently, she said, I think you should write a non-fiction book about soil.
Yeah.
And I thought of a sort of working title as What Does Soil Do For Us?
Yeah.
Because it does so much.
But you could still bring some illustrations in to
Oh,
it.
yes.
So it could be non-fiction, but still childlike, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bring loads of illustrations and pictures and having, and then you could get, I'm getting all excited now, because then you could go into schools and you could potentially take different samples of soil.
Yep.
Yeah, so you could say, okay, well, this is soil at the beach, and this is soil with clay in it, and this is, pretending depending on the area of the
Yep.
school, you would know the kind of soil that is typical to that area, right?
Absolutely, because we have
Yeah.
soil maps for the whole of the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
People are used to ordnance survey maps. They don't realise that a lot of the United Kingdom has its soils mapped, so we can
okay.
actually look at soils. There's even
So-
an app called My Soil, which
So-
will tell you what your soil's like.
So if somebody was, say, probably this wouldn't happen so much in today's day and age, but say somebody wanted to start up a farm, or they wanted to have a hobby farm, and they wanted to buy, a place that they could do this, they could look at a soil map to say, well, actually the soil is not very good here for
Yes.
this type of agriculture or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they could even, depending where it is, they might even be able to find out is part of the land they want to farm actually all right for certain crops, and maybe another part gets waterlogged. So perhaps
Yeah.
they could grow tree crops there.
Yeah, yeah, and it would help them to make the decision of what they grow. Very interesting. I know sometimes you can tell that just by driving around, so you can see what other farmers are growing, and it also depends on the climate,
Yes.
because we've just had an incredibly hot summer in the UK, so I'm sure that's affected
Oh, yes.
because the soil needs water to help things grow. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
The plants have got to be able to access the water from the soil. And if the soil is clay, then it can bake and crack, and then it's very difficult for the plants to access that water. If it's a darker soil that's more open, then they can access it.
Do you, as part of your studies then, do you understand the water tables? So how far down the water tables are?
Yes,
And
yes,
yeah,
we have to do all that.
That comes into it. yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So when did you retire?
6 years ago.
6 years ago, okay.
Yes, it's flown by.
But you're still very heavily involved. As you said, you just chaired a conference.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah, I'm chair of the Northern Soils Network of the British Society of Soil Science, which is the main soil science organisation for the UK. And so that involves quite a lot. And that's great fun, working with other soil scientists in the northern region, which is a big region. It stretches from as far as really, let's say, the River Dee, all the way up as far as the Scottish borders.
Oh, okay.
So it's a big area from west to east.
And you chair that?
I chair that, yes, so that keeps me busy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you go to different conferences around just as a participant, I'm assuming.
Yes. I'll never get tired of soil.
Yeah.
I mean, I
No,
think that-
but people kind of say, soil science, what's that? But it is. I think it'd be very interesting. And I think what you're doing is you are fascinated by the natural world. And I think children are naturally fascinated by that as well. It's only when they get older and they start to get drawn away by electronic games or whatever it may be, other parts of life, and it's not cool. But if you can instill that in the younger children, and who knows, you might be inspiring somebody.
Well,
to do
absolutely.
that.
There is a real need. We now know that children are nature poor. They are not getting out into the natural world anywhere near as much as they might have done 25 years ago, say. We can't blame all that on technology. I know people say, well, they're on their iPhones and their iPads and everything. But it's more than that, and it might be that parents have less time. There might be less time in the curriculum for teachers. But thankfully, we have got a group of young ecologists coming through, because if we look at the famous ones, that David Attenborough, Yolo Williams, Chris Packham, I hate to say it, but they are all getting older, and we need another generation of knowledgeable youngsters to come through. And we do have people in their late teens, early 20s, who are really good. But the critical thing with them is when you say to them, when did you start doing this? And they started when they were 8 or 9 years old. So you're right, we need to capture them in primary school, sow the seeds of enthusiasm and interest, and then hope that they're not swayed by their peers when they get into secondary school. I would love it to be cool to be able to go out and look at birds, look at flowers, look at landscapes, and understand what it's about.
Well, I know in GCSE geography and so on that they do go out and they go into the rivers, and they are doing a bit of that. But I think it's only if you're taking geography do you do that.
Yeah.
But then, as you say, David Attenborough has inspired loads of people, and lots of kids I know watch Blue Planet series and so on. So he's kept that alive and kept it kind of current.
Yes.
But I do think that more needs to be done in the in that, early years of school. So, and they do like that. They like
They
getting
love
their
it.
hands dirty and so on, don't they?
I think that's
so-
actually, if I think back, I think that's really where my soil interest lay, in that my parents were fantastic and they let us climb trees and get dirty. And I used to make mud pies. And I just wonder if that sowed the seeds, that I
Yeah.
knew there was something about feeling soil, feeling the grains between my fingers and knowing there was something different. And maybe that seed was sown when I was 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
old. They weren't soil scientists. I didn't know any soil scientists,
no.
but I think that's where the seeds were sown.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to take a break for a track, and we'll come back and we'll talk about moles next, moles and worms. But yeah, I'm going to stay on you, Jenny, and make sure that your third book is going to be about, soil and yeah, just how it works and how we need it and how it makes things grow and all that. I just think that'd be brilliant. So now that we've agreed on that.
We have we?
Yeah. We've talked about soil and the importance of soil, and we've talked about buzzards and birds and all things natural world. So I feel like I'm sitting here with a female David Attenborough.
I wish.
So Jenny, the second book that you wrote is a book of short stories, really, and it's about a mole. Now, did you come up with this in your writing class? Didn't you come up with, was Marcus one of the ideas you came up with on Jude's writing course, or am I wrong?
No,
No,
don't think
it
so.
wasn't one of them. No,
no.
okay. Well, where did you come up with the idea of Marcus?
Well, I think it was because, obviously, of my love of soil, and particularly my desire to communicate this to children. I really wanted children to know that soil was interesting and was fun. And I started to think about the organisms that live in soil. And I have a friend, Angela, who laughs at me because whenever I go anywhere with her, I'm always photographing molehills, because molehills actually are very interesting, because a molehill can show you what the soil type is without you having to go and dig a big hole yourself.
Okay, yeah.
And so I started thinking
They've
about...
done the digging for you.
Yes. So I started thinking about, okay, I wonder if I could do a story about a mole. And then I thought, well, I've really got to have a worm in there, because seriously, worms are so critical to the health of our soils. They're really, really important. Queen Cleopatra knew that worms were important. Charles Darwin knew that worms were important, and we need to keep remembering that worms are important. So I suddenly thought of this friendship of a mole and a worm. And of course, the first challenge was to make them real people and think of names for them. And I thought of Marcus the mole, but it sounded a bit flat. And so I started doing some research, and I found out that mouldiwarp is the Old English name for a mole. So in the past, if a farmer was complaining about lots of mole activity in his field, he wouldn't say, oh, those moles are annoying me. He would say, the mouldiwarps are annoying me.
Okay.
So I suddenly thought, Marcus Mouldiwarp, yeah, that's great alliteration. It sounds lovely. And what I can do with children is actually get them to pronounce the P at the end of the name. So it's got all sorts of dimensions to it. Then I was stuck with a name for the worm, and in the working version he was Wriggly Worm, but I knew that wasn't right. And I went on one of your writing retreats, and I actually went to bed early. I was tired, and the others stayed up exploring everything to do with writing. And when I came down in the morning, they said, we've solved your problem. We've got a name for your worm. He's Quigley. And I said, Quigley the Wriggly.
Yes.
Now, that came about because one of the girls, Imelda, said that her daughter Tilly had a favourite teacher called Mr. Quigley. I didn't realise then, but I then found out that Mr. Quigley is the head teacher of the school where I was a governor.
Oh my gosh.
So quite coincidentally, we were talking about the same Mr. Quigley.
Wow.
And thankfully, Mr. Quigley doesn't mind having a worm named after him. The children in his schools think it's hilarious. But it just felt very right to me that we had Marcus Mouldiwarp, the mole, and Quigley the Wriggly, the worm.
Right. Perfect. Now, this was done by a different illustrator, Carol Chevalier, who's another team author illustrator. And we've chosen this, it's a bit because not quite a toddler book that's full of color illustrations, but because there's short stories. So there's illustrations dotted throughout. So Marcus has quite a pronounced nose,
He
as
does,
they do,
he does.
which is what they use for digging. Now, just at the beginning, you kind of explain the whole Mouldiwarp family, don't you?
I do,
Marcus's
indeed,
family.
yes.
That's kind of at the start. Meet the Mouldiwarps, and then so who's all in? Let's just tell us who's in his family.
Right, well, obviously we've got Marcus the mole, and I should say he's a bit of a mole with attitude. He's certainly very confident, and he likes to tell you that he's confident and that he can achieve great things. Then he has a sister, Lizzie, and Lizzie is probably the clever one of the family. So she's the one, she works hard at school, she reads all her books, and she's also the one that Marcus will go to if he actually can't solve a problem. He believes that Lizzie can solve the problems.
She's younger.
She's younger.
Yeah.
Yes, Marcus is the oldest of the children. Lizzie is also quite creative, and so she likes painting her claws different colours with nail varnish. And then we've got Archie, and Archie is just a baby, and he just needs food, warmth and cuddles like human babies. Mole babies are quite the same. And then we've got the parents, Mr. and Mrs. Mouldiwarp. Mr. Mouldiwarp spends a lot of his time digging and finding food to store in what we call a fortress. And a mole fortress is a big molehill. It might be up to 1 metre high.
Wow.
And that's where moles will store their food for the winter or even for the short term. And Mrs. Mouldiwarp helps with the digging, but she also does a lot inside the molehill, keeping it clean and tidy, looking after Archie. And also making sure that Marcus doesn't get up to too many adventures. So she despairs of Marcus sometimes, and she'll often say, "What are you up to, Marcus?" The other thing I should say about Marcus is actually he likes different hairstyles.
Yes, I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah. Now, that's a problem if you're a mole, because you've got very short hair. So he has hair extensions. He has his hair like a Mohican. He wears a wig. And of course, I think your listeners can imagine that does cause problems if you're a mole who is burrowing through the soil.
Yeah, it gets in the way.
It does indeed. So many's a time when Mother Marcus, Mrs. Mouldiwarp, despairs, and she'll say, "Oh, Marcus, look at your hair," because she can see that it's made a mess of things.
And I think a lot of mums say that about their little boys. What have you done to your hair?
So yes, so they're an interesting family. And then, of course, Quickly the Wriggly lives in the soil, but he's not a mole.
But he's Marcus's best friend.
He's Marcus's best friend, yes.
So how many stories are in there?
There
in the
are
book?
5 stories. Well, the first part, there's an introduction to the family.
Yeah.
And then there are 5 stories.
So just tell us briefly each story and what it's about. Marcus to the rescue. What's that about?
So Marcus to the rescue is when he helps Farmer Tilly because the river overbanks during a time of very heavy rainfall and her fields are flooded. And of course, a farmer cannot have flooded fields. It's going to affect his crops. So Marcus calls lots of moles together and gets Quickly the Wriggly to call together lots of worms, and they dig lots of tunnels, and the water in the fields drains away through those tunnels, and Farmer Tilly's field is saved. The next one, The Hidden Hoard, this is actually based on true story. So this is when they help some archaeologists. The archaeologists have been told they can't carry on digging, and yet they're sure there's hidden treasure. And all of a sudden, Marcus starts digging, and the archaeologist notes something shiny in a molehill, and it's a coin. And so they go on to help them to
So
find
that's happened
treasure.
in the past, has it?
That's happened in the past. That was real archaeologists who were told they had to stop digging, and then they happened to notice a molehill, and there was a Roman coin in the molehill. So there's a truth behind it. Moonwalking Marcus, as it suggests, is Marcus and Quickly going to the moon. And this, again, there's a little bit in it that's based on truth because I call Marcus a molinaut and Quickly a worminaut. And in fact, there were plans, and there still are plans, it was on television only last night, that there are plans to send some worms up into space to see how their muscles behave.
Right.
Because worm muscle is the nearest analogue we've got to human muscle.
Wow.
And apparently when astronauts return from Earth, they have great difficulty returning to good muscle condition.
Okay.
So they're going to use the worms as a test.
And they've called them worminauts,
And
haven't
they've called them worminauts. And so I thought, well, if they're worm wormonauts, then obviously moles are molynauts.
Yeah.
And then there's one, Here Be Dragons. This is about a poor young dragon who's lost his family. He was so busy looking in the woodland for all sorts of things that he didn't notice his family flew away. And so Marcus and Quigley help the dragon to actually find a way to get back home to his family. And then finally, moving on, I think has a very much a sort of cultural tone to it, because Marcus looks above ground one day and sees a big sign, doesn't know what it says, gets Lizzie to come along, and Lizzie says, oh dear, they're going to dig up the field, they're going to build houses.
Oh.
So this is tapping into the whole issue about loss of greenbelt,
Yeah.
the housing crisis, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so really it's a story about a community having to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And en route they accidentally find themselves in a badger set, and so they have to apologise for that. And then they find themselves in a rabbit burrow, but eventually they find a soil that does just the right things that a mole and a worm need, and they set up their new home.
Mm. Oh, that's great. Fabulous stories. And I think the children are really going to, the problem you're going to have when you go into schools is, which story do
Yes,
I
I
read?
know.
Because you won't be able to read them all. But so, yeah. And then at the end, you've got, which I think is really good, you've got 10 amazing facts about moles and 10 amazing facts about worms. So again, it's just part of the educational side of you.
Yeah, I wanted to bring a little bit of science in, just to make them see that this, okay, we have the characters, and obviously I've got my mascots, but I want them to know that moles and worms are real and that they are important. Particularly worms. Some children are frightened of worms, and they get that message from adults. We're not naturally afraid of worms, and I'd like them not to be afraid of worms.
Yeah.
So if this is a way of introducing them to that, then great.
Maybe we should do a book about spiders next. They're so small, these tiny little things, and everybody gets so afraid of them, don't they? It's funny. Brilliant book. Now, yesterday, the 11th of September, if you're listening again, you just use the dates because today's the 12th. So yesterday was when you launched it on Amazon.
I did.
And you became an Amazon bestseller. So
I
congratulations.
did. Thank you.
Yes, I think we got in the top 30. So that's fantastic. And I'm sure more and more people will be buying the book. And hopefully, if I've got any listeners, and I'm going to share this, and hopefully you share it on your Facebook page as well, because you can listen again to this show on Kellen FM just by going to the website and looking under the shows Wednesday, and then find the Indie Author Show. From tomorrow, it will be where you can click on it and you will be able to hear this show. Then it will also go on my YouTube channel, which you'll be able to share the link to that. Now, when it goes on the YouTube channel, it's minus the music, because we can't, for royalty reasons, we can't keep the music with it. But what it will do is, if we can reach more and more people, basically families whose children are already really interested in the outdoors, in the natural world. I think these are perfect books that will fit in with them. They're not interested in Peppa Pig, or they want something a bit more substantial.
Yeah, that's what I'd like, is to think that this supplements for those children who, because let's face it, field guides can be a little bit boring with young children.
Yeah.
But this is to fill that gap where they've been out with mum and dad, or grandma, granddad, uncle, auntie, whoever it is, and they've started to listen to birds, or they've looked at molehills. They can see molehills and wonder what's happening there. They all know earthworms. I'm sure they know earthworms. Yeah. But it's to help them to get to know them in a more comfortable way.
Yeah.
So if there's a story woven around them, then they can start to think about Marcus Mouldywarp or Barney the Buzzard.
Yeah.
I'd love it that if they could look up in the sky and think, is that a Barney? And that might not be the accurate scientific way of doing it, but it gets them to know what a buzzard looks like.
Yes.
And that's a start.
Yes.
And that for me would be great.
And it's a perfect, The Adventures of Marcus Mouldywarp is what this is called, by Jennifer Jones. And it's a perfect book for bedtime stories as well, because there are short stories. So you can read one story, then shut out the lights, and another night you can read another story, and then hopefully the children will ask for it. And that's kind of the greatest compliment of all, is when a child ask, can I be read that story again?
Yes,
You know?
I've had that with a couple of people, funnily enough, both former students of mine, who have said that their little ones, when they've said, what book do you want tonight at bedtime? And they've said, Barney.
Oh.
And if they say the same about Marcus
Yeah.
Mouldiwarp, that would be lovely. That means the most to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's you're getting the message through, but you're getting it through in a way that is interesting to children. So
Yes.
it's just. I feel, I say this all the time, but I feel so privileged to be able to work with you authors who come up with these fantastic ideas. And there's always, particularly the children's authors, there's always a message, kind of
Yes.
going on behind the scenes here, and that the children are learning from it. It's not necessarily in their face, you're not preaching to them, but it's something that's helping them to get that interest. So, I applaud you
Thank you.
and all of the other children's authors that work with us, because it's just brilliant. So please go on Amazon and look for The Adventures of Marcus Mouldiwarp, and also Rock on Barney, and you'll see them both on with Jennifer Jones. They should both come up now on Amazon. And Jenny, what is your website, Facebook page where they can find you?
Yes, they can find me on jenniferjonesauthor.co.uk. That's my web page.
Mm-hmm.
On Twitter, I'm at jjonesauthor, and on Facebook, I'm just Jennifer Jones Author.
Okay.
So you can find me everywhere.
Yeah. And I have to say that Jones is kind of a common name in parts of the UK. So yes, we've stuck on author on there just because there's a lot of Jenny Jones and a lot of Jennifer Joneses out there. Me living in Wales, I think Jones is probably the most popular surname.
Well, I've got ancestors who are Peter and Jane Jones, and I can't tell you how difficult it is trying to trace your family history with names like that.
Like that, gosh. So we need Marcus Mouldiwarp Jones or something like that. That will definitely stand out. But yeah, if you come across her page and you see a mole and you see a buzzard, then you know you're in the right spot. So thank you, Jenny. I can't believe that we're coming down to the end of our show already. I told you at the start that it goes fast, doesn't it? I think I've got time, just looking at the clock. Yeah, I've got a bit. I just want to ask you a question. And it's about moles.
Right.
And it's about people who get moles in their garden. And it's like, ugh, why are they destroying my garden? So what do we do? How do we, and I'm sorry if this is a loaded question, but is there anything we can do to ask Marcus and his family to go move out of my garden and into the field that's next door?
It's a very difficult question. It's so difficult to solve. I have a lovely cousin, Paula, who lives in Cumbria, and she and her husband are vegetarians, and they don't want to hurt animals. And they got a mole in their garden. And in the end, John just watched until he could actually see it come above ground. He caught it, and he took it somewhere else. So that's the humane way to do it. People say you can get these ultrasonic ways of deterring moles. I don't know if they work or not. I've got no idea.
But what I want to know is and I don't have in my this new house that I moved to, I don't have moles in the garden, but I did at my other house, and it was surrounded by farmers' fields. Yeah. So why did the moles come into my garden? Why would they not stay in the farmer's field? Is there anything in there?
It could be something about the texture of your soil, the structure of your soil. It might have been easier to dig.
So I've got lazy moles.
Easy way out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just wondered if there was something from
actually, you might have had a very healthy soil. I mean, I hope the farmer did as well. But some farmers will use agrochemicals, and that does stop some of the native insects and organisms. Now, maybe if you weren't putting a lot of that down in your garden, you might have had a lot of earthworms.
Right.
And this is one of the challenges for Quigley, is that moles eat worms. Now, he doesn't eat Quigley, of course, because they're best friends, but moles will eat worms.
Oh, okay.
So if you've got a lot of mole activity, it might be you had a very healthy soil.
Healthy soil, yeah. Okay. So there's no real answer to it, but I was just always curious why they would come into a garden if they were surrounded by kind of pasture agricultural land. Now, do you find many moles in cities?
I was just going to say that. You don't actually find a lot of moles in cities.
Is that because of the concrete and everything,
It
all the
is,
footings?
and a lot of what we call made soil. And so that if you think about cities, very often you dug over because you're going to build, I don't know, a skyscraper. And then you might put some more soil on top or some spoil. And so if you dig down urban soils, then you can find old oil cans, cables, wires,
wow.
bricks. And so imagine if you're a mole trying to burrow through soil and you suddenly hit a brick.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's what happens in Moving On. The final story is that they hit bricks and concrete and everything.
Right,
So,
right.
just think, what's life like as a mole, and would I actually like to burrow through that sort of soil?
Yeah.
Your clay soil that you spoke about, they would have great difficulty trying to
Getting
burrow
it.
through that.
Okay, so maybe that's why
Yes.
I don't have any in my new garden then. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jenny. It's been lovely chatting to you, and good luck with all of the things that you're doing and going into schools. And anybody can get in touch with you or through me, because we're creating a directory of all of our children's authors so that it will be a one-stop shop for schools. Or any kind of brownies, cubs.
Absolutely.
They're all
Libraries.
libraries, yeah. So, get in touch if you'd like to speak to Jenny and have her come visit you. You do live in the Northwest.
I do, yes.
You live over Liverpool way?
Yes, South Merseyside.
South
yes.
Merseyside, yeah. So, but you're willing to travel within reason.
Yes,
so.
absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And we'll go to a final track. And don't forget to listen again and tell everybody about the Indie Author Show. We're back in a fortnight with another guest. I don't know who that guest is yet, so I won't tell you who it is because I don't know. But I always have somebody interesting. So take care, everyone, and we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks.